Hello, welcome to Don't IEP Alone. I'm Lisa Lightner. Let me turn my camera on. There I am. Okay, cool. So welcome to another video blog podcast episode of Don't IEP Alone. I am Lisa Lightner, everyone's favorite special education advocate. Today we are going to talk about some red flags in the IEP and 504 process. Before we get to that, if I could bore you for just a minute, but no, this isn't boring. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the online space, and in particular with independent publishers. I talked a little bit about this on my Facebook page the other day, and maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't, and I'm getting ready to send it out an email. But that is, one of the great things about the internet is that it was equal, that everyone had equal access, and whatever information was out there, that, it kind of was like a level playing field. Mom blogs have been really, really instrumental to the online space and generating so much great content and useful content like what I put out there, which is just necessary content, to, your favorite recipes and your favorite crafts. And like when I see all the speech therapy blogs and the OT blogs and the teacher blogs and all these great people out there putting out this content for others to use and access and adding so much more to the online community. But what's been happening lately with Google and a few others is that, every dollar that I earn from ad revenue on my site is a dollar that they don't earn. And as we know, with big corporations in this country, they don't really like that. Right? They don't. They want to earn all the money. So they've really been squeezing out these small independent publishers, which they can do because they're Google, because they're Reddit. And Google just bought a lot of Reddit, a big chunk of it. And some of these, and Microsoft is a part of this. So first of all, it's not just about me and other moms like me and my livelihood and all that, but it's about kind of like the fairness of it all. And when you search for an IEP question online, do you want to get your answer from someone like me who has attended hundreds of IEP meetings, who has, I've testified before the Senate and I've done all these things and I'm in the middle of writing a book with a publisher about IEP. Like, is that someone who you want to get your IEP information from? Or do you want to get it from either AI run by Microsoft or Google, or, kind of like some hired writer, which is also what's going on. And they're just hiring people to publish this information. And what they're also doing is that they're like scraping sites like mine. They're scraping the information, rewording it, and then putting it out as theirs. So my ask today is just this, is that, support your local independent publisher, support that local small business. If you're buying something for yourself or a gift, please consider the small business online, the Etsy shop, the things like that, rather than, the big Target, Walmart, Amazon type places, because they're all just kind of squeezing us out. And, when I put this on Facebook yesterday, there's another online mom blogger who says, I have 3 autistic kids at home. Like, she cannot work outside of the home. She doesn't have anybody to watch these 3 kids, nor could she afford to have a job that, like, I don't even know what job you would get that it would pay you a salary that would be meaningful and pay for childcare of 3 disabled kids, right? Because that's just how it is. Like, the society and the workplace in America is not friendly to families like ours. And many of us really rely on this income that we generate online, to support their families. So support that, teachers pay teachers before you support somebody else. Like, support that online person who's, really trying to make a go of it, with their recipes, with their crafts, with their activities, with their travel tips. I have a friend, and I want you to go visit her site if you live in New Jersey. Her site is Jersey Family Fun. And it's an amazing website because she has had, for the past 10 or 15 years, she's had this kind of squad of moms and kids who have literally gone all over New Jersey, and they have visited basically every single venue that you could ever want to visit in New Jersey. And they take all their own pictures of their own kids and they give their own feedback and they give you tips for navigating that venue. And they produce calendars of the special events and discount codes and coupon codes and real first person parent based reviews and kid based. Like they ask their kids, what did you or didn't you like about this, right? It is such amazing content. And then, she's getting squeezed out. And it's dumb stuff like Groupon and Living Social. Like if you search for certain things now, instead of finding her stuff, which is, again, it's independent and legit content, you're getting reviews from just garbage sites that are like, oh, the 10 best places to visit in New Jersey, which people are just generating. They've never been to these places and so on and so on. So support your mom, your local mom business, your local mom and pop shop if you can. Now let's get on to IEP and 504 red flags. A couple of things that you want to keep your eyes on as we do head into the end of the school year. You might be having your annual meeting coming up. A lot of people do. So the first thing I want to say, and then this is kind of like a big red flag, is that IEPs and 504s are very separate documents. 504 plans existed before IEPs. It's a law, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It's a law that was enacted before IDEA. They were never meant to be like lumped together the way they are, but they are. And I get it because they both are about disabled children. So I kind of sort of get it, but they weren't meant to be like an either or. And this is what I'm seeing. So first of all, it's a huge red flag if your team tells you that you have to try a 504 first. You do not. They're two separate documents. Nowhere in either statute does it say that you have to try one before the other. It was never meant to be like a stepping stone or a precursor or a pre-qualifier of any kind. The other thing is that 504s were never intended to be what I call an IEP light. And that is how they're getting used. And to kind of appease parents and quiet them down and to get you to stop asking for things or asking for evaluations. They're just saying like, no, we don't think he needs an IEP, but we'll give you a 504. Again, it was never meant to be used like that. So if you think your child requires special education, ask for special education evaluations. Now, on my site, I have a whole article about the differences between IEPs and 504s. You can read that there. I will put it in the show notes and, you can kind of take it from there. So the other thing about both IEPs and 504s, kind of some red flags, is when it comes to accommodations and IEPs and 504s. So a 504 is mostly accommodations, but IEPs will have interventions, and in many cases they will have accommodations. When it comes to these accommodations, you want to make sure that you are paying very close attention to the language that is being used. I'm seeing a lot of kind of tricky words put into these accommodations, and then parents are mad because they think it's not happening. But if you go back and read it, it's like, yeah, it is happening. And let me give you an example. Had a parent who was mad. Her IEP said that the child would be pulled out for tests and certain assignments and that they could go to the test, the resource room for testing. Wasn't happening. So she reached out to me, hey, this accommodation isn't happening. What can I do? And I said, send it to me so I can read it. And sure enough, if you look on there, it says the child will have access to. So when she approached the school about this, they said, well, he didn't ask. He didn't ask to go to the resource room. So they didn't essentially deny him access, or they didn't essentially violate the 504 plan. It just said that he would have access, and he did have access. He just didn't ask for it. So you want to make sure that if your child does not have self-advocacy skills, if your child is not comfortable, some kids think that they don't need help or they don't want to ask for help, whatever the reason. They don't think that they need to go to a resource room for testing. They don't want to stand out from their friends, so they won't ask. But if that's the case, or again, if your child lacks the self-advocacy skills because they don't want to stand out, whatever, you want to make sure that it is worded properly in the IEP or 504 that this will happen. And that might be something as simple as teacher will prompt student to go to the resource room for testing. Again, it's that simple change in words. You want to make sure that any of the accommodations, if your child does not have these self-advocacy skills, or if your child does not have the self-awareness skills to recognize issues, you want to make sure that the onus is not on them to make these things happen. Things like asking for sensory breaks, asking for any type of accommodation. If they do not yet possess that skill, then the responsibility should not be on them to do that. Some kids need direct instruction in all these soft skills that we take for granted. And if that is the case, then that is the case. Another thing is just to look out for, and sometimes I'm kind of surprised, but teams will even say like, oh, well, these are just things that we put on every 504. We put these accommodations on every IEP. Okay. That doesn't sound individualized to me. But if they just really read very generic, and you know what, get with other parents, compare IEPs. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Every child is different, but there's nothing wrong with meeting a mom for coffee or lunch and saying, hey, let's look at our IEPs. You might find, as has happened, you might find that your IEP is identical to another child's. So those are the kinds of things you want to be aware of. If it's just sounds or feels generic, they're not individualized to your child, they insist on keeping accommodations on a 504 plan that your child doesn't need. Now, again, getting them to remove accommodations that your child doesn't need, I don't know that that's the hill I would die on, but it would be getting them to add accommodations that my child needs. Yes, I would push for that. But just kind of like that generic feel to it. You want to make sure that it is individualized. Otherwise, what they're doing is they're just kind of going through the motions and putting whatever it is that they put on every IEP and 504 on yours. Another big red flag is that when you read your child's present levels section, it should be a thorough and accurate description of who they are. If it's not, it needs to be redone. And I have a ton of information on my site and in my training for that. We spend a tremendous amount of time and modules. I think it's the first 3 or 4 modules as far as getting that present levels section correct. Because if your present levels section of your IEP is not correct, the rest of your IEP will be garbage. So goals on your IEP, and do this from year to year. You want to compare one IEP to the next. So if you have reoccurring goals year after year after year, if you have disappearing goals, any of those things you want to investigate further. Any one of those things is not necessarily a denial of FAPE, but it could be. If a child has the same goals 2, 3, 4 years in a row and isn't making progress on them, something's going on. Either new or different or more interventions need to be investigated and discussed, or are the goals too lofty, or has the team misevaluated the child and they've completely missed the mark. For example, they're attributing some, say, reading issues and reading skill deficiencies. They're attributing it to ADHD. And so the IEP looks ADHD, but what's really going on is that the child has dyslexia. And so they need a completely different set of interventions, stuff like that. So those goals should, you can remove goals from an IEP if the team decides that it's no longer a priority, or the child has achieved it, or, whatever the reason. It's okay to remove goals from an IEP if the team agrees to it, but you just want to make sure that year to year that they discuss it and discuss the goals. Progress monitoring. It's near the end of the IEP. At most IEP meetings, it's kind of one of those things that comes up last for discussion. And at that point, people are tired, their brains are fried, and they just kind of go, oh, yeah. Most progress monitoring that I see on IEPs is some stupid little addendum that basically just says that you will receive your progress monitoring reports in conjunction with report cards. So you want to get this clarified, defined, exactly what it's going to look like, what kind of reports you're going to get, how often, and so on. And if you don't think that 2 or 3 times a year is enough, which for some kids, arguably it isn't, because you want to check progress. You want to be able to change course and add, subtract, change direction if things aren't working out, and you don't want to wait until that second or third progress monitoring report. So, just keep an eye on that. So, okay, so those are my things. To recap, for accommodations, look for generic stuff, look for tricky wording, look for things being, the onus being put on the student to do things. In IEPs, you want to look for a solid and robust present levels section, a well-defined specific progress monitoring section. You want to look for disappearing goals, repeating goals year after year. And again, a 504 was never meant to be an IEP light. It was never meant to be a stepping stone to an IEP. You don't have to try one first. And there is a ton of more information about this at adayinourshoes.com. And I cover this in all of my training as well. So enjoy the rest of your day. You can always go to forums.adayinourshoes.com, where every question is answered by a working advocate. So go there and ask your questions. Have a great rest of your day.